Good evening. I call to order this public hearing for the Cave Creek Unified District's virtual instructional time model for the 2023-24 school year. Are there any public comments? Okay. Is there a motion to leave this public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. I now call to order this business meeting for the Cave Creek Unified School District. It is Tuesday, September 12th, and it is 6 o'clock. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All members of the board are here with the exception of Vice President Brown. All members of the cabinet are here, and our student leader is here. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Is there anything anybody wants to move? I'm going to pull out item 5.21 and just put it after action consent. Anything else? Okay. All in favor of the amended agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our agenda is as is amended. All right. President's report, item 2.4. I had the honor and pleasure of attending Desert Sun when Sam Baker was, he's an author and he's a vet and he's 100 years old. And he's a very interesting gentleman, but he wrote some children's books and he read to some of the students at Desert Sun. Very neat guy and very sharp for being 100. I also attended the Policy Governance Summit that the trust presented, and it was extremely informative, and I believe we're going to have a presentation tonight, so we'll have some additional information on that. And that's what I've done. Anybody else have any updates?
Just wanted to report that on September 9th, I was able to attend the ASBA Delegate Assembly as a representative for Cave Creek, and I can give like a little synopsis of what I went over at a future meeting.
Okay.
I've been able to participate in different curriculum nights at different campuses, both at the high school and the junior high. Family night at Black Mountain, which was a lot of fun with a lot of games and food trucks. Got to attend the homecoming football game, so that was fun to see. The weather was nice, wasn't as hot as I expected it to be, so that was really good. Our Falcons won. And then this past weekend up in Flagstaff with our mountain bike team, where our JV boys both placed first and second. So that was very exciting to see them. It's a very young team. We mostly had a freshman team for the high school last year. We had a freshman girl place third. And then junior high 8th grader Olivia Payson got first place as well. So a lot of wins for CCUSD with the mountain bike team this weekend.
Nice.
All right. First, I want to start by thanking Mr. Dolzell, who does a fabulous job of keeping in touch with the board. I just want to say thank you. I feel like we're up to speed with all the different things that are going on, which is super refreshing, so thank you. And also thank you to Julia Scotto. I think you're doing a great job with the minutes. I know we recently revised the way that they're done, but they're so thorough and easy to go through and pick out the bullet points, so thank you for that. And then I also attended the Policy Governance Summit on the Trust and attended two really dynamic presentations about Generation Z. And I know for a lot of us, we shake our heads and wonder about that generation, but it really explained a lot to me about their upbringing, their socialization, their phones, mobile devices, the job market pool, and what all's going on out there. And it really did open up my mind to a whole new set of possibilities and understanding of why things happen the way that they are. So if you can find any books, I know we both got the slides and stuff on that, but it's really super informative, and it'll stop some of us from going, what is it about that generation? I just don't get them. So anyway, just wanted to say thank you for that. That was a great event.
Awesome, thank you. Item 2.6, Superintendent's Report.
President Busby, members of the board, I am honored to start my report with a couple of academic accomplishments. 7 Cactus Shadow students have earned recognition from the College Board because of their GPA and their performance on AP exams. Congratulations to our National Hispanic Recognition Award winners, Derek Palmer, Joshua Eaton, Isabel Haber, Nicole Feistel, and Sophia Baruman. Congratulations to our National Indigenous Recognition Award winner, Kayla Kohler. And lastly, congratulations to Robert Gilbert, who won both the National Hispanic Recognition and National Indigenous Recognition Award. I would also like to share some recently released IB score information. The nationwide pass rate for the IB diploma is 64.4%. The statewide pass rate was 58.1%. And our pass rate at Cactus Shadows was 100%, with all 6 of our graduates passing. But wait, there's more. Additionally, the average score earned per exam, and this is out of 7 points, nationwide was 4.19, statewide was 4.24, and our Cactus Shadows average score was 4.8. So congratulations to those students and our teachers. Cactus Shadows varsity football was in Las Vegas last weekend. Both the coaches and players wanted me to say a big thank you to the board because you approved that trip for them. They had a great time, came back with a 54-19 victory, are currently 3-0, and it was great team building and really one of those high school memories they will have for their lifetime. And last but certainly not least, I would like to introduce the Cactus Shadows High School Student Leader of the Month. On the dais with me this evening, Mr. Xander Simmons, a student I have known for 6 years now and have had the pleasure of watching him grow into the young man here with us tonight. Xander?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Xander Simmons, and I've been in this district since kindergarten, attending horseshoe trails, Sonoran trails, and now I'm a senior at Cactus Shadows. My hobbies right now include watching the LA Dodgers with my dad every day, as well as currently attempting to survive senior assassins. I work as a teaching assistant on Sundays at Congregation Beth Israel for 3rd grade. Additionally, I've been a professional actor since I was 4 years old in film and commercials, both in Arizona and in LA. My dream job is to be the general manager of a Major League Baseball team, and I want to study sports business at ASU. One thing I'm proud of at the high school is the IB program. The program is offered and unique to our school, which allows students to take rigorous courses that better prepare us for real-world experiences. At Cactus Shadows High School, we have a fantastic IB coordinator, Ms. Thomas, who has dedicated countless hours to the success of IB. This year, my senior year, I'm taking 3 IB certificate courses, which is something our school offers that is different than other IB schools. The certificate program allows me to take the IB courses that I want instead of the full diploma. As I apply to colleges and plan out my future, IB is very advantageous and looks excellent as colleges consider me for acceptance and scholarships. Entering college with many courses already completed because of AP and IB is something to be very proud of.
And that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you. Item 3.1, call to the public. Okay, we have no calls to the public. Item 4.1, the September Students of the Month. It is with immense pleasure and pride that we come together to celebrate the extraordinary accomplishments of some truly exceptional individuals, our Students of the Month. Each month, we are privileged to recognize students who exemplify the core values that define our district: perseverance, leadership, compassion, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. Tonight, we are not just honoring academic achievement, but also the qualities that make our students well-rounded individuals and future leaders. The renowned American author and poet, Maya Angelou, who once said, "Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it." This sentiment perfectly encapsulates the essence of the students we are celebrating tonight. They have not only achieved remarkable success, but have done so with a genuine passion and a commitment to their craft. Our Students of the Month have shown us what it means to inspire excellence in everything they undertake. They have gone beyond their comfort zones, challenged themselves, and consistently demonstrated a willingness to learn and grow. They serve as beacons of inspiration for their peers and a source of immense pride for their families, teachers, and the entire community. Each student being recognized tonight has a unique story of dedication, hard work, and determination. Whether it's in academics, arts, athletics, community service, or leadership, these students have set a standard of excellence that we all can aspire to. They remind us that greatness is not a distant dream, but a tangible reality that can be achieved through unwavering commitment and a passion for what we do. As we honor our Students of the Month, let us also remember that their achievements are not solely their own. Behind every successful student stands a network of supportive parents, caring teachers, and a community that believes in their potential. It is this collective effort together that nurtures the growth of these remarkable individuals. To the students being celebrated tonight, I want to offer my heartfelt congratulations. Your dedication, enthusiasm, and commitment are an inspiration to us all. You represent the very best of Cave Creek Unified School District, and we are excited to witness the incredible contributions you will make to our world in the years to come. So congratulations, students. Okay. All right, our first student of the month is from Black Mountain Elementary School, Gio D'Ambrosi Wood. Congratulations. Yes, as I call your name, come up, and we'd all like to shake your hands. Alexlyn Charlin from Lone Mountain, Axlyn, I'm sorry, I am so sorry. Axlyn Charlin from Lone Mountain Elementary. I'm sorry, I butchered your name. Tyler Liberatore from Horseshoe Trails Elementary. Congratulations. From Desert Sun Academy, Ava Larson. Congratulations. Josephine Morgan from Desert Willow. Congratulations. From Sonoran Trails Middle School, Jake Miller. Congratulations. From Cactus Shadows, Taylor Wright.
Taylor couldn't be here tonight because she's at the Fine Arts Center helping a play. She's working over there and managing the crew there, so we'll get this to her tomorrow.
And Matt Baczynski from Cactus Shadows.
Congratulations.
Okay. Scooch in.
We're going to look at the camera. You guys have to help me look good. Parents, do you need a picture? This is a good time. All right, one more big hand for our students. Now would be the opportune time to go. If you are more than welcome to stay, we would love you, but you are also free to go at this point. Congratulations. Congratulations, guys.
I don't know. I don't ask Bill if that's good. Okay, moving right along here. Item 4.2, the trust board policy, and that's going to be presented by Mr. Dolezal and Ms. Denise Lowell-Britt.
President Busby, members of the board, it is my pleasure to invite Denise Lowell-Britt Esquire to take you through a presentation on the trust model board policy option. This is an information-only presentation.
Thank you very much. Board President Busby, board members, and administrators, thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. Our firm was one of the 4 firms that had been recruited by the trust early on in this process to actually develop the policies. And so I have been familiar with them for some time, and I believe that they will serve districts very well, those who choose to adopt them. So what I wanted to do tonight is really just walk you through this PowerPoint presentation, but I have additional information if needed. I know that others do, and we're happy to share any information that you feel you need in order to assess whether this is the right fit for you or whether you would like to continue with existing policy service. Both are obviously options for you. All right, so what is the Trust Model Policy Program? This was a program that the Trust basically created for its member clients, its members, K-12, and it was crafted basically, as I said, with the support of 4 different law firms and our staff, our attorneys. And so we worked on this for months and months, divided the work up between chapters, but then we all reviewed each other's work as well. So the policies were created from scratch. The intent was to essentially reflect, current law as well as certain best practices. And again, stop me at any time if you have any questions. Why was it created? Because members really had been contacting the trust for an alternative. Members had been requesting a nonpartisan, simplified solution to their policy services. Also, there have been some concerns over time with policies that just didn't seem to be performing as they should in terms of reducing legal liabilities and being functional for school districts. And because the trust provides liability coverage for almost every district in the state, the trust itself was well aware of where districts had landed in some difficulty when their policies were not, as good as they might be from a legal perspective. And so the trust determined that the best way to help its members reduce legal liabilities and really to, I think, assist districts in having good operational procedures as well was to develop the policies itself with this team of experienced attorneys and input from the members. And by the way, as each of our firms were working on the policies, we also reached out to and involved experienced superintendents, former superintendents, and then other kind of content experts around the state. And also other kind of alphabet organizations, representatives of Arizona School Administrators Association and ASBO, for example. So what are the benefits of this program? First of all, it's clearly, my mouth is dry, I'm sorry, customizable to meet governing board needs. It is not intended to be a one-size-fits-all when it's appropriate for districts to actually modify policies to meet their individual needs. Because, so much of the policy program is based on compliance with law, there are certain things that certainly as a district lawyer, one would not suggest the boards change, because the whole purpose here is to ensure compliance with the law. However, you would see if you reviewed the policies, and the policies are available for anyone to see on the Trust website, you'll see that it makes it very easy to identify where, both from a legal perspective, there are options for boards to consider, and also as you get into the process for discussions about where it might make most sense to customize them to meet your specific district's needs. The policies you will see are very user-friendly in terms of the interface on the website. They're well organized, they're well numbered, and so we've found, the feedback that we've received from districts is that they're finding it quite easy to use. There's also less of them than current policy services, which also makes it a little easier for districts. The program is divided up into the chapters that are set forth here. Chapter 1 is about district governance. That's really about you. And so that would be a chapter, certainly, as an important stakeholder, you would be paying attention to. And there are definitely options in this chapter that you could consider relative to the way you want to function as a board. Chapter 2 is a very short chapter dealing with administration and the superintendent's responsibilities. Chapter 3 is a fairly significant chapter dealing with business operations. Chapter 4 is about human resources, and then Chapter 5 is all about students. And then also included is a glossary of terms and a quick start guide. And that's available, again, for everyone's ease of use. In terms of transitioning for those districts that would like to do that, there's kind of a template, I guess, that the Trust has available to districts to help them walk through the process. This is a very summative outline of the transition process that you could consider. The first is just, preserving your existing policies. Once you determine as a board that you would like to move forward with the transition, then your administration can notify the Trust of the board's interest in joining the service. Then the Trust will send an agreement for you to review and consider, and if you're comfortable with it, to sign, obtain your board approval, and return the executed agreement to the Trust. And then there's a purchase order in process to be invoiced. The cost is very low. It's in the 200 area. We have the information if you need it to kind of start out, and then there's another, less than $300 fee to get started with the policy service. So very low cost as these things go. And then the next step would be working with your prepaid lawyer or lawyers to actually work through the policies. And I have been involved in this process for several different districts so far, and I'm working with some others. And I think that each district is deciding what works for them in terms of this collaborative process with prepaid lawyers. So, and when I say that, the point of sharing that it's a prepaid lawyer is because this is built around the fact that as a district that already budgets for the prepaid legal program, you pay for that service annually. You don't have to pay additional to have legal counsel support you. This is one of those covered services under the prepaid legal program that you've already paid for. So anyway, you can work with your attorney and then also decide what stakeholders, what committees, what timeframes, et cetera, you'd like to use to work through each of the chapters. There will be recommendations from your stakeholders, from your committee people, your administration, and others about what you might want to change in the model policies to meet your needs. And then eventually, after these processes occur, the policies will be provided in a proposed format for your review and approval. After all of that is done, at that point, the district would notify its existing policy service of the intent to either cancel or non-renew the contract going forward. And then, of course, once all of this is accomplished, the policies would be provided and uploaded to the trust so that it could then place it on the policy platform, and it would also appear on your district's website. So that's a shorthand version of kind of the process that most districts are following as this transition occurs. The trust also offers some post-transition services for districts that participate. First is, of course, we know that every legislative session, Okay. Thank you. Part of the responsibility of the trust, the updates based on changes to law. And then the trust does offer what they call a comprehensive policy review. Right now, I think the cost would be $1,000 a year. You would not have to do that your first year, presumably. But as time goes on, if you want the trust to come out and do a comprehensive review of your policies, that's available on request. And so it's something, I guess, future to look at if you proceeded. And then, as two of your board members can attest to, the trust does put on some programs and will continue to be putting on some programs, public education, policy events for governing boards and administration. And at this point, the goal is to keep those free for board members and administrators. And that's really a thumbnail sketch of this. I'm happy to, again, answer any questions you have, and others here may want to do so as well. Are there any questions?
I do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The districts that you've worked with to transition to the trust program, how long has it taken to do the transition?
That's a great question, and it's very variable. As I think there was a conversation at the summit recently, and I heard one individual who's been through it say, really, the time it's going to take is not that, whether you choose to do it in 6 weeks or you choose to do it in 6 months, the time that needs to be devoted is probably going to be the same. So it's really how much time your team has to spend to do this on a concerted basis. But we have districts that have actually done it in 3 months. Ooh. And then we have districts that are planning for 6 months. I'm working right now with a district that is just getting started with the planning phase of transition. And that board, the intent is to start now. I've been in 2 planning meetings with their lead administrator thus far in the last couple weeks. And then their goal is to take the proposed policy to the board in March with a start date of July 1, because it will make a lot more sense to transition effective with your new fiscal year. But other districts are taking longer, So I think that's going to be up to you and your team and what seems feasible, based on people's work commitments and, the board's direction, really.
So if I understand correctly, the time-consuming part is looking at the existing policies to see how they match up?
Well, the trust is going to help you with that.
Okay.
So as part of this service, the trust will do what's called a crosswalk, and it will already identify for you, they'll compare
Okay.
your current policies with the proposed policies. It'll also identify where maybe the trust doesn't have an existing policy, and I'll explain why that might occur. So you can decide whether or not you want to bring something over from your existing policies. Likewise, you may have some policies that you've developed that are unique to Cave Creek. And so if you want to carry those over, then, the crosswalk will reflect what's not your current provider's copyrighted policies, what have you developed, and then you can decide, do you want to bring them over or not? So the trust will do a lot of that time-consuming work. The time-consuming part is really going to be your teams meeting together and reviewing the proposed policies in connection with the crosswalk to see, what works or doesn't work, what do you like or, what don't you like. But I really feel like the districts that I've worked with, it's gone really well. It's gone really smoothly because first of all, the policies, again, are more organized and more streamlined than many of the current policies that districts have. It makes it easy to walk through them. The other part of this is that we really did focus on, in the policies, what's legally required. And so teams know when they're going through the policies that for the most part, if this is what the law requires, this is what the law requires. The procedures may sometimes take a little longer because their districts may want to operationalize the policies in a slightly different way. And so the team members typically really do, boots on the ground, know, how you function, how you want to function, what maybe you want to change about the way you function. And it has not been a difficult process. And now, of course, with, I know, at least 10 districts that have already adopted and many more going through the process, you will also have the benefit of learning from others, meaning through prepaid legal counsel or through the trust. People are learning as we go, right? And so now districts will even have the benefit of some ideas about how to move through the process more expeditiously and efficiently.
I can see a true benefit since our legal counsel comes through the trust to have the policies that were developed by the trust so that there's a clear understanding and interpretation of the policy. So there is a definite advantage there. And on the transition side, it gives us an opportunity to review our policies, which probably haven't been reviewed in a very long time. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. You said about 10 districts have these in place right now. Would we be able to get a list of some of those so we could go and do that?
Out to the trust website, and you can see the districts that are already have them online, and you can take a look, at the different policy. Maybe you look at a district that, you're particularly interested in seeing how it might compare, and you can just peruse them at your leisure.
And so they take all those policies that we have and they fit them into how they fit into these 5 chapters. Is
Right.
that-
Well, yes,
basically-
except for example, the law doesn't require a naming policy for buildings. So that's an example of where you would not find in the trust policies a naming policy. But there are some districts that want to have naming policies. So, we have created some optional ones. And so as you go through some of those, if you go through the trust model policies that are not yet been adopted, you can actually see where there's different options, for things to include or not include. And then the trust will work, and your prepaid legal counsel will work with you to again, develop any policies that we didn't do because our mission was to keep this streamlined and really focused on legal requirements. But doesn't mean you can't have policies that you need to work for your district.
Gotcha. And is there a cost comparison between what we're doing now and this service?
Did you say cost comparison?
Yeah.
Okay, I have not seen your current contract, but I know that the current provider is in the thousands of dollars, but I don't have any information about that.
So Currently, our provider is $4,968 per year. As Denise said, there's a one-time $255 fee to start up and a $240 annual fee after that.
The trust has committed quite a lot of time and effort and money into this because its goal is to reduce legal liability. That is why it exists. And so it is in the districts, and of course the trust is comprised of school districts. And so the board is, school districts, right? And so that's why the intent is to keep the costs low, because ultimately it can actually save money for both the trust and for school districts. So that's the intent behind the low cost.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
For the prepaid legal, yes, if we get so many, we pay for so many hours a year. Oh, there we go. For prepaid legal, I'm guessing we pay so many hours a year. Is that right, Marcy?
Do you know? Okay, my understanding is that through the trust prepaid legal policy or services, you have about $300,000 of legal services available to you
Okay.
annually. That's my understanding?
Well, thank you, and thank you, Member Walker, for the question, Madam President. The way the prepaid legal works is based on the size of our district, and so every district has a different amount of prepaid legal. So we have unlimited prepaid legal, okay? But it will come back and be an issue when we revise our contract the next year. As you saw this year when we brought the trust agreement to you, prepaid legal went up. That was an increase in cost. So we do try to manage it as administration and the contact we do have with our attorneys and be thoughtful about that, because we know that there will be just some situations where we have to have representation. And this again, I have looked at the trust policies, and they are very streamlined. So I'm thinking because of the work that's gone in up front to this, there will be minimal need necessary on the backside if we chose to implement this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jackie, any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Item 4.3, financial presentation presented by Mrs. Rodriguez.
Good.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to turn over the first part of our financial update to Rick Brammer. He is an expert in demography and population studies, and I wanted him to give you a little bit of background of a very high level of what's going on with enrollment and general school population in the state as a whole, and then we'll get into how that looks in Cave Creek.
Awesome.
Okay. Mr. President, members of the governing board, Mr. Dalzell, staff, it's our pleasure to be here tonight. We're going to be working on an updated demographic study for the district a little later on in the year, after we have more of this year's data and hopefully more data from the state relative to the impact of the ESAs, because right now it's a new missing piece to the puzzle for us. So, but we wanted to kind of set the stage for what you're going to see in Ms. Rodriguez's presentation, which focuses on our trends in enrollment, and we give you a little bit of understanding why we're seeing what we're seeing, and to know that you're not alone, in as much as that helps or doesn't help. But in this particular chart, the blue bars show 40th day head count of every year since 2000, 2001. That was the first year I actually worked for the school district. And so and that's a head count number, and again, Mrs. Rodriguez will explain the difference between that and the other measurements that you all use. And then the red squiggly line is the year-over-year percent change. And so we've got basically 3 or 4 distinct periods that we're looking at here. The 2000 through 2006-07, which was still active development going on in the district. There were houses being built in the district that were targeted, not necessarily to the lowest entry-level buyer, but certainly for move-up buyers, and people with families were very much attracted to those housing units. Anybody who was here during that period knows that the recession, the Great Recession, we used to call it, in 2007 to about 2010, pretty much shut down, all the construction that was going on during that period of time. And it was right about that period of time also when charter schools took it to a new level. And the first charter schools opened in the state in 1997. And so we're going to look at that, how they've increased. But they went through an incredible growth period. And the district did okay, actually, during that period. Now, I will say one of the things that's different about your district right up front is because of the affluence of the area, and it has always had, is you've always had a lower service rate than a lot of districts. There are many parents here who can and do, can afford alternatives. So you've never served quite as high a percentage as your population as some other districts. But the fact is, of the population that was out there to serve, it was pretty solid right through 2019-20. And at that time, the charter schools in the district actually started losing enrollment. And that little bump you guys got in 2019 was because of a school that had to close or severely cut back in that year. And so then we all know what happened in 2020 with COVID. And the thing that was different, and if you read our last report, we did it in 2020, which was the single worst year in history to ever do an enrollment projection. But we anticipated that about half of the students or so would come back from that drop. And no one knew exactly what to expect. But the fact of the matter is that in all the affluent districts I work for, they didn't come back. And in fact, in some cases, none of them came back. Now, this just shows the cumulative decline in enrollment in this particular set of districts since the 2010-11 school year. And really, Gilbert and Deer Valley are the only two that have any serious development going on. And Gilbert is actually slowing down right now because they're running out of land. But you can see those two, both had a little bit of an uptick in 21, 22 after the big crash, but not nearly as much as they lost. And you can see the cumulative impact, in Scottsdale Unified. You were actually running ahead of them in terms of, the amount of loss that you've experienced. The number of alternative providers that they have in their district is incredible, as it is in Paradise Valley. And so you see everyone has been losing ground, even the places where the school-age population isn't necessarily declining, which is another thing that's happening while all of this other stuff is happening. Now, I guess, the thing that's most bothersome, I think the reason why I'm here tonight, is what the red line, which is your district, has done since that 1920. By far, the largest percentage drop due to COVID of any of the districts that we were looking at. And as we've done it across the valley, from the Southwest Valley to the Northeast to the Southeast, what we see is the greater the level of affluence in the district, the greater the level of the permanent loss. And essentially, in a nutshell, those people were able to find a different way to do it. And with all between that and that desire to do that, and all the money that was spent on infrastructure to support distance learning and all of these things, they just simply didn't come back to the public school district system. So it's not just you. One of the reasons why they didn't come back and why we've been, struggling to hold enrollment is the growth of, I'm going to focus just on charter schools here. So this is statewide enrollment. These are students that the state actually pays for. So the red bars would be students that are enrolled in district schools, and the blue part of the bar is the students that are enrolled in charter schools. And so you can see clear back, to when they were in their infancy, back in 1990, 2000. We just talked about the 2010 period, where by then their enrollment was up over 100,000, about 12%, about 11% of total enrollment. And basically after that period, it just continued to climb. And so now we're double that. We're at 22%, over 220,000 students in charter schools statewide. One of the interesting things to me about the last bar is the 22-23 year. It shows the almost no change in total charter school enrollment. Look at those two numbers in the top of those blue bars. Guess what happened to the charter schools last year? ESAs. And so if you were to take the number of students that are new to the ESA program who are also new to a private school, because a lot of the students who got ESAs last year, some 75%. Now, the year before there was 10,000 ESAs. Last year there was 40,000 ESAs. But about 3/4 of those were already in private schools. So the impact on enrollment for us and for charters was actually fairly limited, but it would still add another 10,000 at least onto that number because the population's growing right now. So they should have seen an uptick. So I'm going to start adding, as soon as I get the data, the ESA part of the bar and see, to get back to an apples and apples comparison, over time. And so I'm really anxious. And if you all know, as of last week, the count for this year is 64,000. So that's 24 to almost 25,000 new vouchers this year over last year. And the big difference is that a lot of them weren't going to private school before. Those people rushed in. They were the first ones there. And there's still some of those coming in, but the ratio's flipped around. So 75% of them are new. So, the impact of it, unfortunately, is undeterminable because there's no existing cap. The thing that jumps out at the numbers so far for this year is they do show it by grade. And so there's 7,500 kindergartners on ESAs this year. There's 2,000 seniors. But so I'm thinking here, if we capped it tomorrow and we had 7,500 students per grade level because we just let them continue, that would mean we'd have at least 100 to 120,000 students on ESAs by the time it got through all 13 grades, even if we capped the kindergarten enrollment at the current level. So I'm, incredibly concerned would be, the nicest way to say it. Not only for the school system, but for the state budget. So, and then something that, whoops, I think I went the wrong direction. Something that is, obviously hitting everybody, including private schools, is the fact that there are just, statewide at least, many fewer kids out there coming in the pipeline. This is a complicated chart, and I'm only going to read along the red line, which is for the state of Arizona. But during the Great Recession, the number of births, or the birth rate fell by 19% to what was then the lowest rate on record in the state of Arizona. That meant the number of births in a year fell from 102,700 to 85,000, while population actually went up. And then for a few years it stabilized during what I like to call the recovery, that little flat period through about 2019 or so. Through 2014 in terms of the births, where, it was a recovery from the recession. In U.S. history, every time during a recovery from a recession, birth rates have peaked, have had a little bit of a baby bump back on the other side from people who put off the decision. Well, we went flat, and then again, it plummeted. And from whatever I've been able to read, the impact of the Great Recession was so severe on not only the children who experienced it, that saw what their parents went through, basically made a permanent decision that they weren't in a big hurry to have kids. And the average age at first birth went up by almost 5 years in a period of 10 years. And we know that the longer you wait to have your first child, the fewer children you will ultimately have. And so with that effect, down through 2020, the number of births statewide dropped to 76,400. Now think about how much population has increased, during this period of time, and the number of kids coming in the pipeline is actually smaller. Now, it's offset a bit by in-migration. People are moving to the state now, and they do bring kids with them, so our hit won't be quite as big as it might look on this chart. But the fact of the matter is the pot is not getting bigger. And unless you're building entry-level houses right now, and I can say this with incredible confidence, you're losing enrollment because there's simply fewer kids in the pipeline. So it doesn't make it any more fun, but hopefully, at least sets the table for understanding kind of what's going on to you. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Brammer?
I did have one question. You touched on students that are opting for alternate sites for education by using vouchers. Do we know, is there a way to find out, how many of those are coming from, Cave Creek and using vouchers? Or
So far, the short answer is no, but I think there will be.
Okay.
Right now, what you can see is where students are using them.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, you received some for some of you actually receive ESAs for some of your students. All the districts do, mostly for special ed students.
Yeah.
But the data is heavily redacted. So I'm looking down the list of all the charter school or all the private schools and charter schools and stuff, and unless it's more than 20, they just put in an asterisk. So at this point, I really don't have very good information.
Okay.
Now, the state just did this year, based on the 2021-22 data, show us for charter school students where their home district was. So we actually do know, we have a breakdown of where all the students who live in Cave Creek who receive public funding go if they're going to a charter school. We do have that information. There's a little bit of a question about, the accuracy of it. It's a new report for them, but it's incredibly helpful to our work. And I would hope that, likewise, we would get some kind of a report like that about the vouchers, because I think that's important for us, and it's the only way we can possibly plan for it.
Thank you.
Have they told you why it's redacted, or is it just still in process, or do you even know?
I do not know the answer to the question. Sorry.
Do you know if it's true? I mean, I keep hearing comments that most of the students using vouchers are coming from the wealthier districts. Is that true?
Well, yes, and that's why I was talking about the impact in affluent areas, because, if you think about it, other than parochial schools, where oftentimes if you're a member of a church, they'll take whatever you can bring to the table, right? But other than parochial schools, they're usually $15,000 to $18,000 a year for a lot of the true private schools. Scottsdale Christian Academy, $15,000, $18,000. So your voucher doesn't get you there. It helps you get there. And so guess who gets to really utilize it is the people who are almost there to begin with.
Okay.
So it's the upper middle class communities where we have seen the biggest hit, which totally is consistent with why you would see a big hit here. And we have a big hit in Gilbert, we have a big hit in Scottsdale.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming and sharing that information. Very interesting statistical and eye-opening information when I looked at that. So one of the things that I wanted to, we've talked about since I've been here is the capture rate. And just kind of gives you a little bit of a background why our capture rate may be lower than other districts, because of the ability for our families to be able to drive their students to those other places where some of other districts, their families may not have the means. But I wanted to see, are we truly losing kids? So I went back and I looked at where we were in 2018. And I said, if we didn't have any growth, which we know there's really no homes being built out here or homes that are affordable for families, And we just moved the kids up, kinders to first, first to second, and so on and so forth. Did we really lose kids? So I took a look at that from 2018. Then I took a look at, if I just looked at prior years, like last year to this year, moving all the kids up a level, and then knowing that we lose or gain kids, kinders, coming in versus seniors leaving. So I put a little graph together for us to really take a look at that, because I think that we are one of the best school districts in the state. We have very high-performing students, as we heard tonight by some of our data. We have one of the top 10 high schools in the state. So there shouldn't be any reason why people wouldn't want to come here, right? This is an amazing place for you to bring your children to be educated. So what were some of those factors? And so looking at this graph. So if you look at the top line, that's a growth from prior year. And if you look at the middle line, that's the growth from 2018. And then if you look at the bottom line, that's our actual ADM. So if we start from 19, you can see moving our enrollment from 19, if we just rolled everybody up from 18, kinders to first, first to second, we would have had 5,100 students. We had 52. Next year, in 2020, we got a lot of students. That was a high population year. What happened in that year is we stayed open, our surrounding districts closed, or they went online. So we had this big, huge influx of kids that came from PV and Deer Valley because they wanted their students to be in person. Then, when all the schools opened back up in 21, they all went back. Now, if you look at where our kids, we did lose kids there. In 21, we lost kids, and some of you in this room experienced that loss and what that did to our budget. Did we ever recover? Well, if you look at then 2022, look at those numbers. Look how in line they are with the kids if we just rolled them up from grade to grade. We didn't technically lose any kids. Our kids came back that year, the kids that we had from grade to grade to grade, even if you look back from 2018. Then 23, we did lose a little bit of ground. We lost some kids. We don't know exactly why yet, but we did lose some kids. And then again this year, and as you're going to see tonight in the financials, we did lose some kids. Now, not you see the difference in the ADM, which is almost 222 kids or 21 kids. But a lot of that loss was from we have a low kinder class coming in as opposed to the seniors going out. And as you heard Mr. Brammer right now, there is a lot of kinder kids that are taking advantage of those vouchers, of those empowerment scholarships. And probably some of those would have been our kinder kids. So there's some terms that I want to just define for you because Mr. Brammer talked about enrollment, which is a head count. That's the actual number of kids that are in the seats, their body count, ADM, you'll hear me say ADM all the time with funding. Average daily membership. That measures the average number of days that students are enrolled the first 100 days of school. So if your students start on the first day, we count them as one whole student if they're here through the 100th day. If they start on day 50, they get counted for a 0.5 ADM because they were only here for half of those 100 days. So that's why the ADM oftentimes is lower than enrollment. And then weighted ADM is what you'll see in a budget. That is how we actually receive our funding. And you can see that there are characteristics of some of our students that on the funding formula, they are weighted at a higher weight. I gave you an example there of an autistic self-contained student, weighs 1.988 times a regular student that doesn't have needs. High school students weigh a little bit higher as well, and I just thought for grins, I'll show you how many different weights we deal with. So there are all different types of, based on students' needs, weights that we get in additional funding to support those students at those different levels. Thank you. Sorry. Member Walker, members of the board, they have changed. There are a couple on here that have just been added recently, and that's gifted and free reduced lunch. The special needs are exceptional student services. Students, those rates, we have been asking for them to be increased for years. We got a couple of bumps this year, not very many, but those of you who are familiar with services for our special needs students, they are very expensive. And oftentimes the funding that comes with those students does not cover the cost of the services that those students actually need. Okay, so here's the big number. We, in weighted ADM, which is how our funding is calculated, we lost 254.6 ADM, which equates to $1.2 million. Kind of a scary number. It took a while for Superintendent Dolezal and I to kind of process this and what that meant and how we were going to operate this year with this knowledge. So here's the good news. The good news is when I proposed and adopted the budget that I presented to the governing board back in June and July, we projected that we were going to carry over $859,000. What our actual carryover is, we just closed our books August 31st, is going to be 2.1. The reason for that is because we still had ESSER 3 money, and we were able to use that to offset some of last year's cost, which means we're going to be able to carry over 1.2. So in actuality, that has saved us from having to do any additional cuts this year. $7,572. I think we can probably manage that with some of our cost savings measures and some vacancy savings that we still do have. Unfortunately, what it means is there will be some decisions that we will make this year moving into next year. So one of the things that we have asked Mr. Brummer's company to do is to do a demographic study for us again. Want to project out. We may have to make some hard decisions. If that enrollment doesn't come back, which looking at those birth rates and then hearing what ESA is doing, probably we will not get any increase in enrollment. As a matter of fact, we'll probably take another dip next year looking at projecting grade level roll-ups with the small kindergarten class that we had this year. If we have the same small kindergarten class next year, you're going to see the same type of decline in enrollment. So we will bring back the revised budget to you in December because we have to reduce our budget. The carryover does bring us back up to even, but because our enrollment dropped, we have to do a revision. But there will be continuing conversations, and as the leadership of the district meets and talks about, and we give you some ideas in the board updates about how we're moving along with some of the projected decisions we have to make for next year. Any questions?
Wow.
Just wanted to mention, this is not always known, you did say that those costs for special needs kids is really high sometimes, and we don't have enough money to do that sometimes, but we have to, so that money will come out of the general funds sometimes, correct? And then everybody ends up having to suffer a little bit because of that. So these are things that we've just had to deal with every year.
Yes, Member Forney, thank you for that. Yes, that is accurate.
Marcy, when you were looking at the enrollment trends, has there been historically a jump from kindergarten enrollment to first grade? You know, if there's 200 kids in kindergarten, you know, 1 year, is it 200 that are enrolling in first grade, or do we tend to pick up some when you get into the primary grades?
When I'm looking at those numbers, I'm looking at them for very little growth. Maybe it's 6 kids, maybe 8 kids, so it's not anything significant enough to say, hey, they're coming back to us from being at other places, which is why I know that we have made a concerted effort to really promote our preschool program, because we feel our preschool program, which is stellar in this district, and we offer a lot of opportunities for our kids compared to some of the other operations and preschools around. That's how we can, get some of our families to come into the district. So we are making concerted effort in that area, but it doesn't look like there are other options for people for kindergarten, and they're selecting those.
Do you know how many are enrolled in preschool?
Member Busby, I do not have that number, but I'll include it in the next board update this week. And I know that's one of those things that Mr. Gross and his team is always looking. We're getting ready to do a campaign for not only hiring, but also to encourage enrollment into our preschools, and then making sure that anyone that is on our wait list, we're getting them into a program. If it's not at the site that they choose, trying to find a site at one of our 5 schools that will work for them. So,
Thank you. Any other questions?
Can I say one?
Of course.
I was just looking at the way she had done those projections and just rolling the students forward like that. And this is a perfectly reasonable and valid way to do, to look at that. But what's so different now compared to 15 years ago when I was here was that when you could still afford to buy a house in the district, at least some people could, it was a move-up housing market. So we would actually have slow growth all the way through the curve until 10th grade. So our classes would actually grow from year to year, not shrink from year to year. So, so you can say it's what it is, but it really, compared to how it would have been, the school-age population hasn't shrunk. It's the percentage that you're shrinking, that you're serving that has shrunk. And so that's why my numbers, they look a little different than the way she's measuring, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just there is a reason why we used to be able to look forward to kids, coming in. The enrollment curves, we look at it by grade cohort, and it used to show that. And just for fun, and I guess I have fun in weird ways, but I was wondering about what the pricing has done to affordability in this district. And so I know house prices have gone up a lot. House prices alone didn't stop the market. It was a combination of housing prices and interest rates that stopped the market completely. And so I did a little math, and according to the American Community Survey, the median home value in this district is $892,000. And if you take $892,000 and put down 20% and finance the rest, the amount of income that it takes to qualify for that note would exclude prior about 60% of district residents could have afforded the median priced house. With interest rates alone, that falls to 30% without any price adjustments. And so it's really preventing even move-up families at this point, from being able to move into the district. And so that's why I wanted to, sorry if I talk too much, but I thought it was kind of an important distinction.
Oh, thank you for that information. Wow. Okay. All righty. Moving right along, item 4.4, assessment results from the spring 2023, presented by Dr. Jensen and Ms. Hill.
Thank you, President Busby, members of the board, Mrs. Perkins.
No.
It has 2 lines.
Nope.
Okay, there we go. President Busby, members of the board, we get to share more exciting news, so I'm excited that after that fun stuff that I think we're all, those of us who moved in, we're stuck here. Nobody's going to buy our houses now. Those of us who aren't here, too bad, I guess. So we better make a good community of it. The good news is we've got some great assessment results that we get to share from last spring. That's 2023. Do you have the clicker? There's a clicker. Go ahead, click.
Would you like to click?
I don't care. The purpose of this presentation is simply to inform the governing board members and the public on assessment results from the 22-23 school year, as well as assessment practices that we use to monitor student achievement so that we can evaluate the effectiveness of our instructional programs and provide some current results. So we have a bit of an agenda here. We're going to go over the AASA. We're also going to go over the AZ-SCI, the ACT Aspire, and the ACT. And then the IB, AP, and our SEALs that we provide students at graduation, and then next steps. Because we have it split up into multiple chunks, I'm going to say, if you want to ask questions at the end of any one of those chunks, feel free. We'll also provide time at the end to ask questions, but that way we don't have to skip back 20 slides to catch up all the time. As always, here's our strategic plan priorities. Of course, this is largely focusing on student success, our favorite of the pillars, as well as employee excellence. So what is the AASA? It stands for the Arizona Academic.
Happy clicker.
Sorry. Back. Well, there we go. Arizona's Academic Standards Assessment. It's the statewide achievement test for Arizona students in grades 3 through 8. And we do require it of all public school students in grades 3 through 8. Which, interestingly enough, just to dovetail off the last presentation, our private school students do not take the AASA. So they do not have that accountability measure as well. All Arizona, I already said that, all Arizona public schools take it. I wanted, this time I'm adding a little section. I typically don't go over this. However, I often hear that public schools, we're not even having students read on grade level. Oh, that's so bad. Only 45% of Arizona students are reading on grade level at third grade. And a lot of our public schools are failing us. But I wanted to make sure that I put out here what a sample test question looks like. So this is a third grade ELA test, English Language Arts, and this is for an 8-year-old. So first, let's note that some of our students, because this is part of the Arizona test, some of our students who may have spent their entire lives living in Phoenix don't even know what an evergreen tree is. So they have to, have that background knowledge of even what an evergreen tree is. Then we need to also look at some of the other key vocabulary they need to know. They need to know what a detail is. What it means to be a supporting detail as opposed to other types of details. And then they, of course, need to be able to just navigate the technology to use this, which you see there's like a scroll bar there that they would need to be scrolling up and down in order to read the passage, as well as to see the entire question. And then I'm not sure if you can see it, but for this particular question, if they don't get part A, or I'm sorry, that's the next question, but for this one, it's what two answers, or which two details in paragraph 1 best support it. So it's not that the students have a 1 in 4 chance of getting the test question right. If I did my math correctly, it's a 1 in 6 chance on this particular question of getting that correct, because they could have chosen A, B, they could have chosen A, C, A, D, etc. So, it's not, can they read Dick can run, or Sally, likes the dog, whatever it may be. The students can read the text. It's what they do with the text that is the challenge, and that's what we're really assessing. And so sometimes when people do kind of bemoan that, the scores are so low, if you look at the rigor of these test questions, I would challenge some adults to answer some of these test questions. We go on and we look at another one here. How does the narrator of the passage affect the story? I mean, that's a deep question for an 8-year-old to answer. They're having to think about motive, all sorts of things there. And then again, if they get part A wrong, If they chose that the narrator of the passage is a, whatever the drop downs are, I'm sure it's, a teacher, a scientist, whatever it may be. If they get part A wrong, then part B, they're toast. They don't have a chance for part B. And so they've completely gotten that test question wrong. Again, I'm not, here to criticize the test. I'm here to show the rigor of the test and so that everybody can kind of get a feeling for what do we mean when we say read on grade level for a third grader. Go ahead. And then here's another one, and this is another third grade test question, and this is one where they're needing to compare two passages. And so you can see they're needing to read source 1, which is called Meals for Pets, and then they're needing to read source 2, which is Building a Natural Habitat, and then they go on to answer multiple questions about comparing and contrasting these two texts and their text structures. So, and I'm sorry, this is actually a writing one.
This
so,
is a writing one, which is also part of the ELA score
yes.
as well. So it's not just the reading comprehension and vocabulary, but it's also the writing after you've read these two passages and compared and contrasted. Then can you put your ideas into a multi-paragraph essay expressing your opinion? So.
Yes. So again, it's not a simple little test. Okay, moving right along. So how did our students do? Well, as usual, we outperformed Arizona. We did a great job. So we had 67% of the students in Cave Creek received a 3 or a 4 on the ELA test in third grade. Math, 65%. Fourth grade, 63%. And math, 58% for fourth grade as well. So very strong. Of course, never strong enough. We always have our aspirations of improving more. Fifth grade, if I remember right, we did take a tiny bit of a dip in fifth grade compared to the previous year, so that's some things that we're looking into, of course, but still well above the state of Arizona for ELA, and then math, the same thing for fifth grade. And I didn't even pull the math questions, but I'm just going to just trust me. And you're welcome to look online. You can Google them and find them yourself. But they are similar, they're also very rigorous, and it's the same type of thing where it will say, select all of the correct answers, and there's 4 options, and it could be 1 correct answer, it could be 3 correct answers, you don't know, and so there are a lot of things that are very difficult.
And Dr. Jensen, the test, if you, in your spare time, wanted to go back and look at all the different sample tests, they're linked on the sample pages, so you can go in and see third grade examples, fourth, fifth, all the way through 8th grade.
Absolutely. So then you see 6th grade, same thing, well above the state average. 7th and 8th grade, same thing, and it's just, I swear it's not just middle school students, it's across the state, it happens. Definitely the test gets more rigorous. Some of those students who have gaps, we're starting to compound on those gaps. So if they were struggling, they're struggling more now. If they were barely making it, we've compounded on all of that difficulty that they've gone through. But we see this statewide. There's always a dip in middle school. But again, our students well above the state averages.
All right. So in addition to the AASA, we also get to take the AZ-SCI, and it is the Arizona Science Test, and it's the statewide achievement test for students in grades 5th, 8th, and 11th. So grade 5 tests your standards, your science standards from 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So hopefully everybody remembers those and they review them. And then the 8th grade does 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then 11th grade does 9, 10, and 11. So again, all the public school students are required to take the AZ-SCI. This is an example of a grade 8 question. So you can see up here at the top there is a figure, and as well as there is a comparing article that you have to read, and then it asks those rigorous questions: which statements describe characteristics of the model ecosystem inside the terrarium shown. So you've really got to know your vocabulary, you've got to be a strong reader, and you've got to be able to assimilate that information, and also make sure you pick 2 correct answers just to get that one question correct. So it is fairly rigorous, and like we said, it tests 3 grade levels of standards. Is that Rain? Okay, just making sure. I'm like, is the sky going to open up above me? Like, what's going on? So here are our 5th, 8th, and 11th scores. You can see that statewide we are fairly lower than we are on the AASA, but CCUSD is still doing a good job. We are committed to improving those science scores and hopefully getting those up there, even though we are above the state average. Questions about AASA or AZSI? One quick question. Yeah. You said private schools don't have to take these tests, but do charter schools?
Yes, charter schools do.
Charter schools do. Because they receive public funds.
Yes, the theory was because they receive public
Public
funding.
funds.
Now that's been equalized, so.
Do we have a
that's-
comparison how we do rank against just charter schools? I feel like that's a big draw for their
Correct.
rigorous.
I don't know that we have us versus per se our local one. However, that would be something we could definitely
We can get
get,
that.
and we could put that in a board report. The difficulty is some of them clump all of their students together, and so for example, if it's Great Hearts, then it might be multiple Great Hearts
Yeah.
campuses as opposed to just one. So we can look into that data. I will say I did a little bit of research over the weekend, and in general, the public schools and the charter schools are typically roughly the same. Like there's not a significant difference either way. Just that's like a big, broad generalization over the state of Arizona. I'm sure Cave Creek, we're better, so.
And Dr. Jensen, those scores won't be released though until into October to where we could look at this year's scores and get that information. So it'll be a little while.
Yeah,
That's true.
it will be.
I have a question.
Yes.
I assume these tests are aligned with the state standards.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You don't have to be that formal.
What? I'm stuck. Yes, ma'am. I'll talk a little
Ooh, so
louder.
formal.
I know.
Now, last year, went to one of the schools during their PLC. And one of the things, and I happened to be in a science classroom. Excuse me. One of the things that they were talking about was how the state standards are interpreted. I assume that, is going to have some kind of an impact because, the standard is teach about clouds. Well, what are you supposed to teach?
Yes, President Busby, that's a good question, and that gets into a lot of what we do during our PLC time, which is looking deeply at the verbs of the standards, because if we would say, for example, that students can, it never says, they will be able to identify clouds. I shouldn't say never, but it's very rarely that it's identify. It's usually much higher level verbs, such as compare and contrast weather patterns across areas or something like that. And so then that comes down to the teachers, where they make it as discrete as possible for the students, because at some point we do need to first identify the clouds, and then now we're talking about something that I know nothing about. So, and then after we identify the clouds, then we could start to compare and contrast what the different clouds look like and what they do, and then how the weather patterns have changed over time, or whatever it may be. And so, yes, that's what we spend most of our PLC time doing, is backing up to make sure that we take this higher level standard and break it down into little bitty chunks so that a third grader can understand that in order to be a good reader, I need to be able to use context clues to find the meaning of a word that I don't know. And that would actually be what a teacher would spend several days teaching, is using context clues to identify words you don't know. And then she'd string, or he would string, all of those lessons together to make a better reader, if that kind of makes sense.
Does the state offer any guidance or assistance when it comes to interpreting the standards?
They do. They offer, the Arizona Department of Education offers different breakout sessions that teachers can attend virtually if they want to really dig deep into those standards. But a lot of it is put back on the districts to really spend that time, look at the standards, align it with the blueprint for the test as well, to make sure that you're also covering, It's not just science, but you've got to hit your earth science, your life science, all those different components within that one science test for the different grade levels. So there are little sessions, and they're usually offered after school.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, the next part that we're going to be talking about is the ACT Aspire and the ACT. These are the two assessments that are given up at the high school. The ACT Aspire is the statewide test that's given to our freshmen or our ninth graders. There's a couple different purposes for it. One, it's always to kind of inform our instruction and allow the teachers to see where those gaps are and see how they can best support our students. It also lets us know which programs are being effective, which ones do we need to spend a little bit more time on. But then it also really helps the students kind of get ready as they explore their high school career to get them ready for college. And so if you look at our ACT Aspire, again, we are higher than our state. So overall in English and reading, we're doing a very good job. Science, again, we talked about how that's an area that we're going to continue to focus on and grow, and then math as well. And then the second portion of this assessment
is then we have the ACT. And so the primary purpose of the ACT is to measure a student's level of achievement in core academic areas taught in high school. The ACT is for Arizona, the state required test. We use that test data for a variety of purposes, such as college and career planning, educational strategy, measuring how our programs are doing, which would be the educational measurement, and qualifications. Go ahead. For the scoring, it's scored on a scale of 1 to 36 for most of the parts. We'll show you here in a minute. The score a student receives corresponds to a percentile that compares how that student did in comparison to everyone else. So one of the things that's important to note is that the average ACT score is 20.6. However, that's based off of the national norm. And so in a state like Arizona, where we test 100% of our students, we have it would be different. 20.6 would be different if it was just Arizona. But in large parts of the country, most of the rest of the country, only students who are going to college and are taking this as a college entrance exam are taking the test. So 20.6 is artificially high, is the short version of what I'm saying there. And I say that because when you look at this, it makes it look like perhaps, we have some students scoring below. I mean, technically they're below the average, but again, that's because we're comparing 100% of our students to 20% of the rest of the country, or 30% of the rest of the country. So in English, again, our students scored well above the state average. Reading, same thing. Writing is on a scale of 1 to 12, so that's different. Math, again, scored above the average, or the state average, and then science, same thing. So again, we outscored the state in ACT. Our composite, 20.8, that's even above, if we said 20.6 is what an average student gets, and that's largely comparing our students to college-bound students across the country, that's pretty good. And then the ELA composite, and then the STEM composite you can see there.
Any questions about the ACT Aspire or ACT?
I'm going to jump in for Member Busby's question, President Busby's question that I'm anticipating, because you asked about the other tests being aligned to the standards. ACT Aspire and ACT are not aligned to the Arizona state standards. They're their own national thing. So if you weren't asking that, I'm hoping that you were, but that just from your thoughts from before, just to point out that those tests are not necessarily aligned to the Arizona state standards that we're responsible for teaching.
All right. The next portion is we're going to talk a little bit about our IB, our AP classes, and the diploma seals that we offer at the high school. So our IB statistics, as you can see up here, we had 6 students received IB diplomas last year. Some of the numbers have been redacted because those students could be identifiable. because we had 10 or less students taking the test, and in some cases, only one person was taking the test. So again, wanting to be respectful of student privacy. If I hear, oh, my son was in this class next door, and then he shows up here on the governing board, it's pretty easy to figure out who the kid is that scored that, and we want to protect our students at all costs. So again, like Mr. Dolezal said, our IB program is very positive and has a great team of teachers. And we are hopeful that this year, in talking with Ms. Thomas, we will have 15 candidates that will receive IB diplomas this year, which will be an increase. When we look at the AP exams that are offered and the percentage of students that are passing, again, if there were 10 or less students that took the test in that specific content area, those numbers are redacted. But you can see that our students did do pretty well. After receiving this information, we went back as an Ed Services team and looked at the national norms, as well as our leadership team looked at it. And in areas where we scored below the percentage of the national, we talked with the high school as well, and they made some changes, such as offering professional development on AP testing, what kinds of questions, what's the rigor asked in it as well. Sometimes we just needed to make a faculty change, and sometimes we just didn't have the right person teaching that class. So we've made those, so hopefully we will see more success this year in our AP exams and the percentage of kids passing. We also have added a couple more classes that are not offered last year but will be offered this year.
And just as a reminder, these exams are really difficult. I mean, they're very difficult because AP has a close relationship with college accreditation groups, and so they want it to be rigorous enough so that the universities will accept the credit. And there's a constant battle between the groups as to how rigorous it needs to be, and I would say most of these tests are much harder than any college course that I've seen.
Each course has a different cut score, so it's not just like if you score a 3 above, then you're going to get credit. So each course has a different cut score that you have to look at to see if they are passing, and the majority of them on a scale out of 6 are 4 and 5 that you need to be able to get the college credit.
And if you're taking several AP classes, then you have to take several AP exams. Is that for each one for each one?
Yes.
And are they all together, or is they split up?
They are split up the way that the high school did their testing schedule last year, so that if you had students, because multiple students are in the same classes, they tended to stagger them throughout the week.
Yeah.
Questions about AP? All right, the final part. I think it's you, Dr. Jensen.
So we offer multiple seals here in Arizona, or in Cave Creek, and so these are the ones that we gave out last year. We didn't give out. Students earned last year. So we have 6 students who received the Seal of Arts Proficiency. 33 students received the Seal of Biliteracy. 9 students the CCUSD Seal of Biliteracy, that's an even higher standard, and then 2 students who received the Global Seal of Biliteracy. So we offer a lot of seals. As you can see, with all of our AP testing and IB testing, we offer a lot of classes and a lot of ways for our students to excel.
Questions about the seals? All right, so our next steps.
So again, this is kind of the lifeblood of our work in Ed Services. So we're continuing to improve and increase our instructional rigor in kindergarten through 3rd grade to make sure our students are ready for that test in 3rd grade. Again, so that we can have them strong in 3rd, so that we're not compounding on mistakes or misconceptions all the way through. There's the constant alignment of our curriculum, instruction, and assessments during our PLC time. We have common formative assessments that we continue to make sure are aligned to our benchmarks. Currently, they're not all aligned, and that's, again, some of our PLC work. Sometimes students will get to the benchmark and they say, that was a lot harder than all those little mini assessments you gave me. And they're right, it is. And so we're trying to trickle the rigor down without making it too scary all the time. Benchmark testing, our AASA mimic tests, which we do early in the spring for a variety of reasons, mostly so that our teachers can intervene based off of that most recent student data, so that they have an idea of how students are going to do on the upcoming AASA, but also so that they can say, wow, my whole class missed this little strand. I need to go back and reteach that. Of course, we continue with our targeted small group instruction to address the areas of deficit. And then this last year, we offered enrichment opportunities during our breaks, during fall and spring break, as well as summer. And super exciting that our A through F ratings are going to be released in November. But we've already seen our data. We know what we're doing, and we've already been acting on our data actively since the first day of school, really. That, I believe. Any questions now regarding the whole presentation or next steps?
I don't really have a question. Thank you for putting all of this together. Obviously, there was a lot of time and energy that went into it, and I know we all appreciate it, so thank you.
I know standardized tests change frequently as far as how long have we been doing the AASA as the standardized test? Do you know?
So they changed the name 2 years ago. I don't know how many of the questions actually changed.
Okay.
I think it's pretty similar to the AZM2 that we had previously.
Okay.
Look at the blueprint. It's the 2016, the ASA mimic for the AASA, ASA, as I like to call it. It's based on the 2016 when it was the AZ variant, then AZM2.
Okay.
Now ASA, names before that.
So just the name's been changing, not really the...
And the rigor has changed.
Okay.
Back when we adopted the college career readiness standards of the state, but not too much.
Okay.
And then some other things that are changing. This will be the first year where we actually have a growth score in high school, because this is the first group of freshmen who took the ACT Aspire that will be taking the ACT this year. So the last 2 years, there have been different metrics to measure growth and all of that. So this coming year will be the first time where they'll use that to measure growth. So that then should be more stable, and we can kind of move forward from there. I'm looking forward from that from a high school perspective anyway.
I just wanted to second President Busby's comments on thank you for putting that together. It was really informative. It's, a lot of people sit around and talk about numbers and they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. So it was, myself included, so it was really good to see that, especially those tests. And I swear I remember the terrarium thing when I was way back there taking that. It's like, anyway, so thank you for the time putting that together.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item 4.5, AIA Sports Online Charter School Students.
President Busby, members of the board, I'll bring Dr. Ryan Pletnick, who's our Director of Student Services, up. He oversees our athletics program at the high school, or K-12, but really at the high school. As you might recall, a few meetings back, it was brought to the board a vote to approve allowing students who are enrolled in an online charter school within our district within our district boundaries to participate in high school athletics. Our presentation tonight will kind of give an overview of our athletics program, kind of a cost breakdown of what athletics cost us for the district, and then we'll make a proposal that you'll take action on later this evening on a proposed fee that we would charge these students and the why of how we came to this specific number. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Pletnick.
Thank you, Dr. Hendrickson. President Busby, members of the board, I think it's just appropriate that tonight we we present this when we saw the data on some of our school populations and enrollment coming through. I think it ties very well, and I think you can probably make some connections as I go through this presentation about some of the costs of our district, what we will potentially be incurring, how we'll have to try to offset those costs, and just some of the infrastructure that we're going to have to put into place to make this occur. I've been working very closely with our athletic director at Cactus Shadows, Mr. Hammond, to gather some of this information so that we can get as accurate as possible on some of these numbers that we're about to see tonight. Just a little background on this, and just linking it to our strategic plan. Certainly, it will link to student success and offering and encouraging multiple pathways for all of our Cave Creek Unified School District students, and what impact it will have on those students. Also, it does have to do with the effective operations, resources, and systems that we're going to have to put into place in order to make this occur and in order to make this as efficient as possible. Now, the overview that I'm going to present tonight is just an overview of our athletics, our athletic costs, also what we're looking at for our online charter student participation fee, and a few other considerations that we have to look at as we are moving forward and we're developing our structures to let this happen and make this happen. Now, with the background, I just want to reiterate that there is no other district in the state that's allowing this. Therefore, we are going to be the example. There's no infrastructure in place with the AIA to fully allow this to happen. So we're going to have to develop systems without any exemplars, without any examples. And we're going to have to be very careful as we develop our processes, and also consider the repercussions and the impact it's going to have on our current systems and the current environment. So as I look at this, these are just some items to keep in mind. And again, I worked with Mr. Hammond to gather as much of this information as I possibly could. Currently, we offer 22 AIA sports. When we look at these numbers, what we're actually going to see is 20 AIA sports because of 2 new non-varsity sports that were being offered, which is beach volleyball as well as wrestling, girls wrestling. So at that point, what we're going to see is a potential increase in costs, just because as the varsity participation occurs, it's going to have an impact on our AIA dues, increasing those, but it's also going to have an impact on other items such as tournaments, transportation costs as well. So I really just keep in mind that these are certainly variable costs that we're going to be looking at, and some of the expenses are really difficult to determine with accuracy, just because they do change year to year, including transportation costs with the prices of gas, also salary prices, and so forth moving forward. We have currently 596 athletes. Our current fees for our athletes, $335. It is a max of $1,005 per family. Now, what a majority of that goes towards is transportation, coaching stipends, and membership fees. We also use other sources such as booster support and fundraising to offset other items, such as equipment, team meals, uniforms, and also there are other costs that you won't see in these numbers are reflected. Just as when we run our varsity events, we do have to pay people to work security, to work the gates and or the entrances. So those fees, again, very difficult to calculate because it can vary year by year. Also, the amount we pay those individuals will vary year by year. When we're looking at this, we are a self-funded program. Most districts do pay the coaching stipends. We do not. So as we do have our fees, our athletic fees come in, part of it does go to pay the coaching stipends. If you look at our athletic fee, it is higher than quite a few other districts. We're looking at, I was just returned from the Athletic Administrators Conference today, and talking with some of the other districts, $100 to $200 is what we're looking at. We're looking at about $335 is what we currently charge to cover those costs. And so to also keep in mind as we go through, when we look at this and we're self-funded, if we want to do things like increase coaching stipends or add coaches, that would mean we would have to increase that pay-to-play fee as well. It also means that if we're looking at adding services or trying to make our systems more efficient, whether it be through Register My Athletes, those types of services, it would cost, which would mean we would have to incur additional costs to our student athletes and or find the money at some other point to do that. So that is always something to keep in mind when we are looking at our numbers for pay to play. And mentioning Register My Athlete, those are some other costs that we do incur to run athletics that you will not see in the breakdown tonight, because that can vary year to year depending upon the amount of athletes we do have registering and how much we have to pay for those services. Transportation costs, there's also been help with our transportation costs. Our boosters has provided some help with transportation costs, especially with our playoff transportation. So that is also something that in the budget we get help with. Finance provided us $50,000 in M&O and $40,000 in capital for a one-time movement towards, because there are needs that we do have, such as uniforms. There are equipment needs that we do have. There are costs that we do need to cover, and you'll understand once we give the breakdown of some of the costs. Also not included are tournament fees. The high school will pay for one tournament per sport. The other tournament fee, normally it is 2 tournaments that our student athletes are allowed to enter. Basketball, volleyball, for example, can add 2 tournaments to their schedule. Those range from anywhere from $250 to $900. Again, it's going to vary year to year by how much those tournaments are charging for it. Also, things we have to take in consideration are future athletic costs. Our turf is entering its final years of usefulness, where we're going to have to look at replacing that at some point. Gym floor, we are going to begin redoing our gym floor. We have just allocated money to help with our lighting situation on the football field to bring that up to code, so we can participate in AIA events. So those are all costs that you will not see. Also, the other costs you may not see in this, we are doing a general amount of money per sport. We aren't breaking it down into individual sports. So that's going to take away some additional costs you may see in some of the more expensive sports. For example, football. If a football helmet, and it costs $600 and it has a 6-year life. If we allow a student to use that for 1 year, then we have to go have it refurbished, we have to have it checked, and then that takes 1 use out of it. So if you look at it, we're using $100 of that football helmet in year 1 for a student athlete. And that's, again, going to vary sport by sport by sport. We're not taking that in consideration in our overall numbers. Okay, so let's get to the dollars. If we look at the general cost of our sports, we look at the stipends with benefits, our AIA dues, approximate transportation cost. Again, transportation cost is going to vary year by year. We look at our trainer salary. We also look at our cost for officials. We are looking at an overall total of $358,294.74. And again, it doesn't take in those variable costs, which I spoke about on the previous two slides. Then if we look at our income, again, $335 per sport, family cap of $1,005, 596 athletes. We collected last year $238,132. So when we look at our cost and we look at our income coming in from that, we are actually at a deficit for our athletics of $120,162.74. Okay, and again, with that deficit, I covered some of the ways that we covered it with the additional M&O, the additional capital. We have boosters that helps cover tax credit. So there's ways that we have to find that money. So if we look at an average cost per sport, if we're looking at 20 sports, we divide it by that $358,000 number, we're looking at almost $18,000 per sport. Then when you're looking at the cost per athlete, it's approximately $601.17 per athlete, which means we are covering $266.17 per athlete in other ways. So you can see the contribution, of course, that we would have to make as a district. Now, other items to consider. The first is reviewing AIA policy. AIA policy 15.3.1.2 does say that if a student does transfer from a brick and mortar from our district into a online charter school, that they would be ineligible to participate the rest of the school year. Now, where it goes moving forward is next year, we don't know what that is going to look like. And if we look at the AIA transfer, this is a new path. So we're going to have to depend upon the AIA to see if we have a football player transfer, they go into online charter school next year, if they're going to be eligible. Again, the transfer rules are going to be different because it's on an online charter school, not an actual school offering AIA sports. So that is going to be something we're going to have to lean on the AIA with, which we don't have any precedence for. We also are looking at other pieces like our oversight. Discipline, we have to examine our current handbook and how to make adjustments on discipline. Right now, if something does happen on a sports field and it does violate our student handbook, there could be discipline school-wise that goes along with it, as well as athletically. We do not have control over the online charter school. Therefore, we don't have control over disciplining other than disciplining through athletics, which that means our athletic handbook is going to have to be revised in order to make that happen. Or again, there could be an inequity in if there is a behavior that's outside of our expected behavior of student athletes. Also, eligibility requirements. This is going to be another structure that we're going to have to build. Right now, according to the AIA, you self-regulate on your reporting policies. So what that means is we have our eligibility, and what we do is say, yes, our athletes are eligible, or no, they are not eligible. When we are bringing in a student from an outside online charter school, we do not have access to their grades. So we now have to figure out how to interact with that online charter school in order for them to report the grades in our expected time frame. So if our expectation is Monday by 9 we do our grade checks, we would have to make sure that the online charter school gives us, and we have permission to get those grades sent to us by 9 a.m. on that Monday. If not, we would have worry of not verifying grades and potentially playing ineligible players. So that is a structure that is extremely important that has to be put into place, which there's no precedence for, and we have to figure out how to get release of information from school to school to school. That is not a transfer from school to school. The next piece is attendance. The expectation, again, is attendance for participation. We have no way of checking daily attendance coming from an online charter school. So as we look at all of this oversight, we also have to consider how much time and also who we're going to have doing some of this work for us. So normally this work would fall on the athletic secretary to ensure all of that information is in time. So again, if we're looking at costs, that would be another cost that it would be taking from our resources at our high school. AIA regulations violations. I covered some of these, the self-reporting and the eligibility. The other concern that as I'm looking at this that I have is if we do have a student enroll and they are in our boundaries, but they do move out of our boundaries, but they do not report they move out of our boundaries, we may have an ineligible player playing for us. At that point, because they are not registered, it does not meet the same requirements for them to report that change of address to us. Potentially, it could go unnoticed. If that gets reported, AIA investigates, violation can occur. Biggest fear on any of these violations would be our students not being able to participate forfeiting games, not being able to participate in the postseason. So these are all items that we certainly have to look into and have to make sure they're shored up so that there are no mistakes that are made. So other considerations, again, current students. If we look at our strategic plan, we have to worry about our current students losing multiple pathways for their high school experience to non-district students. Again, we have to make sure that our rubrics are set. These students are allowed to try out, but we have to make sure our students, as well as our parents and our coaches, understand what this means for them. Also, if we do, the potential of gaining back students. And looking at the potential of gaining back students, and we talked about ADM earlier today, if those students play a winter sport and they decide after the winter sport they are going to come back to Cave Creek Unified School District and Cactus Shadows, then it's after the 100th day we don't receive any funding. When we don't receive any funding, then we're incurring extra costs for them to come back for the remaining year. Now you could say we can recapture those students for the following year, but if they decide to go back online, that was just an additional cost that just impacted us. So now, again, looking at that ADM piece, it's an additional piece related to the potential athletics to come back and leave, or if you're looking at the matter of a senior coming back after the 100th day, there won't be any funding received at that point. Also, the other pieces are parent feedback and explaining these varying policies, because policies are going to vary per student athlete. So just informing our coaches, informing our parents, and making sure they understand what these policies states, and also the potential of a negative effect. Currently, per Mr. Ammon, we have 5 students that decided to come back to Cactus Shadows this year to participate in athletics. They were planning on going online, but they chose to stay instead of going online so that they can participate in athletics. That can actually, if we're looking at this as a marketing way of adding students, this actually can have a negative ramification to that. So if we're considering the costs, now you're talking about the cost of potentially losing the ADM for 5 of our students. As of right now, we have 1 student who wants to come back who is online, who was a former student, I guess, is online now, and has stated that they have interest to return to athletics. So as we look at this suggested participation fee, again, with this, there are costs we don't see. This is, I would say, what we would consider the bare minimum would be that $601.17 for our students that our normal student incurs. Overhead expenses, if we add 10%, again, I would consider that on the low side, but $60 on that. And a registration processing fee. The registration, which I am currently working on, is going to be a multiple step process. It's going to look like they're registering for school with that paperwork, but then we also have to do our register my athlete piece, and then we have to find a database on how to house these students because they will not be in our student information system. So all of these pieces, there is going to be quite a bit of processing in order for them to even register to try out. So the total suggested would be $676.28 to cover just, again, those basic amounts. Are there any questions?
Well, first, thank you for all of the work that you put into this presentation. Help me understand. I'm not sure I understood this correctly, but you, on one of these slides, you had indicated that if one of these online students is deemed ineligible, it could cause the whole team to forfeit?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is the case. So if, again, AIA leaves it up to individual schools to do their eligibility policies. What you'll notice is school to school, you'll have a slightly different academic eligibility policy. We do have our academic and eligibility policy set in our athlete handbook. And so what they do at Cactus Shadows is they do pull the reports for that academic eligibility. And then if a player is academically ineligible, they are to be included on an ineligibility list and cannot participate in in the athletic competition until they are eligible again.
So we have no way of requiring an online school to report to us, they're not obligated.
No, and that's where we have to consider how we would collect that information and how that information would get approved from, an online school sending it to us on a weekly basis. And so the question becomes, if you allow it not to come directly from the school, you can understand what kind of manipulations could occur within the grades that if it's not coming directly. If a parent's signing off on the grades and giving it to us saying, this is what my student earned, it would be like our students going home, Mom, Dad, can you write down what my grade is, and us bringing it into an athletic secretary. So that pathway is something that is going to be difficult to navigate because we would have to get that, we would have to work with that online charter school to give us those grades and release and come up with a release for them to do that and then ensure that they do that on a weekly basis. And then if we're not receiving it by 9 a.m., then it would be most likely our athletic secretary trying to call them to get that in a time frame so we can meet our regular expectations.
With all of the adjustments that we will have to make, it sounds like it's very labor intensive on our side, which then means whoever's doing these tasks, they're actually pulled away from what's really in their job description or what else is in their job description. Am I
That is correct,
understanding
yes.
this correctly?
Yeah, President Busby, that is one of our concerns is obviously we're looking at one student right now. There's potential for obviously more, and what's that workload look like for our athletic secretary, Dawn, over at the high school, and having her chase around all these other systems in order to clear students for participation.
Yeah. The discipline is also a little bit of a concern. I mean, I don't know that we have, an abundance of discipline issues, but if something does happen to if one of our students does something that is an infraction of our code of conduct, we have clear-cut paths. So how do you create equity for that? Because, that one's online and he doesn't have to be held to the same standard because he's not a student, but then that can create discord among those who are here. Well, it's not fair.
Well, and that, I think the key piece when I talked about informing the parents of the key differences, that would be one key difference is educating and informing the parents of what the differences within policy would be. You can give an example of an occurrence that can happen, such as maybe there's an incident that happens online that breaks our code of conduct because it spills over into the school environment, into the athletic environment, where we do, if it becomes a bullying policy, it's a violation of our bullying policy, we have a protocol for that. If the student is not ours, there's no protocol for that. So you also have to worry about the protection of our own students who lose that protection that's brought by the code of conduct, that's brought by the student handbook, that may be removed because those other students are not abiding by that. Again, it would have to be an examination of the athletic handbook and a change to the athletic handbook. And again, I'm not sure of the way it could be possible to add a discipline piece.
So all of these changes would have to take place like sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I got some questions. So you did say that now we are the only district in the entire state that is doing this.
Yes, sir.
And I would assume that some of the things that you just put forth to the board here are probably some of the reasons why nobody else is doing it. Is that probably right?
Yes. Consulting with some of the other districts, also consulting with the AIA. It honestly is a concern because all of these are reasons that it hasn't passed through.
So I'm kind of thinking this is a train wreck, and we're stuck with this for a while. But we will be able to vote on this again at some point in the future, correct?
So 15.3, I don't remember exactly it, but it does require that this is brought to the board every year for a decision to be made. I had originally discussed putting it on the map for July. In retrospect, it would be a conversation worth having, perhaps bumping it to June. Again, for lots of considerations, including should there be any athletes who were considering going online. If we let them know by June, yes or no, that could give them more adequate time to prepare or make a different decision, perhaps that might be better for them based on that response. So as of now, it would be June. We work at your will and follow what you would like. So if there was something that wanted to be done sooner, that would be something that the board would need to bring up and talk about.
Okay, we'll talk about that. So you mentioned that there were 5 athletes that were currently online that said they wanted to come back to Cactus Shadows because they had to be here to play sports, and now we're taking that away so they don't have to. That's pretty much the scenario, right?
Again, in talking with Mr. Ammon, it was he cited 5 that he has spoken to that was the case, that they were going to go to online school, but they decided to come back to play athletics. And again, if we're looking at the AIA bylaw, which is 15.3.1.2, that this year it holds those students without being able to participate if they do go to an online school. Next year, again, it's going to be working with the AIA to try to figure out what that pathway would look like in transfer rules and again, how, if they're open enrolled versus living in boundaries. There's a very complicated web to all of it.
It feels to me, and we talked about this when we voted on this, that the scenario of people that are coming to our schools now and only staying there because they know they have to be there to play sports, them now leaving because they don't have to, is far more likely than these people that might come here because, oh, now I'm on a sports team, I'll come back to the school. So I'm concerned about this on so many levels, but I just wanted to kind of get those out there, and I really appreciate you talking about the oversight here because, being, teaching, I have run into some of this stuff in the past with athletes having to keep their grades up and having to have their attendance up and not getting into issues discipline-wise. We have kids that, when they're on a team, we don't get in any trouble at all, so that's good. And then as soon as that sports is over, so how we are going to do this and on multiple charters, we'd have to do this for whatever charter these kids are coming from, seems like a monumental task. So I appreciate that, and it concerns me on many levels, but I think I'm done for right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And if you put this in, this took a lot of your time too. To put all this together, so thank you for that.
Any other questions?
In terms of the cost development, what about upping that? Like, especially the registration fee of $15. It seems like, we don't want to price it so ridiculously, but at the same time, I think we have to recoup our costs, and I think it's appropriate to charge more if we're not incurring the benefit of them being in district in terms of our funding. So I'm thinking about that as one starting point, and B, what does the parent-student sign, or what type of legality, contract, anything that goes into it to adhere to attendance and behavior policies and a lot of that kind of stuff?
Again, none of that exists. That's everything that needs to be developed. So those are those pieces that I've begun putting together. And again, it's going to be getting it together, getting it through legal, going through those pieces in a very, very expedited manner. So those pieces don't exist. And I know your first part of that, I did not answer.
Member Ulmer, sorry, if I can answer that first part about the fee. So item 5.21, we did set a fee. You guys can amend that item and set whatever fee you want. We can bring it back at our next board meeting after further discussion with a fee that you feel we should land on, if that's your choice.
And just to add a little bit different, but Mesa Unified School District, with ESA money, with students participating in athletics, they're charging $2,000 is the amount they're charging. Homeschool students, correct.
Correct. Homeschool students that are taking ESA money. If you're a true homeschool student, by law, we cannot charge you any more than what we normally charge our students. But these would be homeschooled students that are in maybe a micro school that are collecting ESA money. We're allowed to change that amount.
Do we have any kind of ceiling or restriction on what we can do with these costs?
No, if we're looking at the AIA policy, and sorry, I got to get my glasses. The AIA policy says, if permitted, the member school may charge online charter students additional fees to participate in interscholastic athletics and activities, and that's all it states. So there is no floor or ceiling set. Again, it's never happened before, therefore, it's never been addressed before.
This is a new policy in AIA that got added, and that's how this came to us this year, correct? Or has it been in there for a while and we just haven't?
It is going to be the latter,
Okay.
Member Walker. Yeah, so it's been a policy that's been in there, I believe, since COVID. I know Mr. Dole is always over that prior to when students were going to online charter schools, and it's something that the AIA has just kept in. That's something that we have not brought to the board each year.
All right. That's it. It just seems like there's a lot of missing pieces for AIA to put that in there and then not have any background of even their own roles within it.
Member Walker, we would agree.
Yes.
Is this something that the trust might have some legalese on in terms of contractually with the students who would involve themselves and the parents specifically? And some of this in terms of getting on a timely basis and an accurate basis the eligibility and a lot of that. I don't know.
Well, Member Ulmer, it would.
There's not been an issue.
Correct. This has not been an issue to do before. Certainly, they could give us legal advice in terms of recommendations. And speaking with Dr. Pletnick, I think the most sane answer would be to err on the side of, if we don't get it, then you're not eligible. And because, again, we can't put the rest of our athletes in jeopardy and the rest of our students. So we can certainly reach out to them with what recommendations those are. But again, our board policy, when it refers to students, only governs our students. It does not govern students who are not ours. So that's the difficulty, and that's the gray area in which we reside right now. So looking at those systems again, Dr. Pletnick's looking at, along with Mr. Ammon and that team. Again, we want to take care of all kids. We want more and more kids to come. As Mrs. Rodriguez said, this is an absolutely fabulous place to send your kid to come and experience both academic and non-academic opportunities that we afford to our students here. But, we need to take care of our kids and err on the side of caution with that would be my suggestion.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time, effort, and energy that went into this presentation.
Thank you, President Busby.
Okay, moving right along. Action consent. Item 5. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oh,
We need a motion.
sorry about that. I got distracted by our presentation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Item 5 passes. Okay, item 5.4 7.21, approval of the online charter school athletic fees for the 2023-24 school year. Is there a motion?
Dr. Hendrickson.
Yeah. President Busby, Governing Board, Administration move that the Governing Board approve the online charter school athletic fee for the 23-24 school year as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Hey. Well, I'll take this.
Okay.
After what we just heard and the incredible tasks that are going to have to be done to do this, well, for one thing, the amount doesn't seem anywhere near reasonable. I think that a lot of things are going to have to be thought of before we can do this, and I move that we table this for a future agenda.
Good idea.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
President Busby, Governing Board, if I can chime in real quick, if you maybe offline have discussion on what you think that fee would be, we can definitely kind of do some breakdown or to give you some additional data to help you come up with what that set fee is. So we can definitely either take your recommendation, or if you want us to do some additional data dives into our expenses, we can present that or maybe present some options. So let us, if you give us some guidance, we'll follow that.
And President Busby and Board, just a point of order, we had a motion to table in a second. We have not had a vote.
So is there, all in favor of tabling this, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are tabled. All right, item 6, old business, we have none. Item 7, new business. 7.1, instructional time model presented by Dr. Jensen.
Okay. President Busby, members of the board. House Bill 2862 allows a school district or charter to adopt an instructional time model to meet instructional hour requirements through things like remote instruction, project-based learning, mastery-based learning, and weekend courses and evening courses. We have held the 2 public hearings, and so at this time we're presenting for you the instructional time model, and administration moves that the governing board approves the instructional time model as presented. Go ahead and you can scroll right through that. We've seen this multiple times by now.
So moved. I'm sorry, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. 7.1 passes. Item 7.2, approval of interim superintendent's out-of-state travel, presented by Mr. Dolezal.
Madam President, members of the board, administration moves that the governing board approve the interim superintendent's out-of-state travel as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item 7.2 passes. Item 7.3, legendary teacher resolution, presented by me. All right, the governing board resolution in support of Legendary Teacher Day, which is Thursday, September 28th, 2023. Do I need to have a motion before I read this?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Whereas the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board believes we have all had special teachers that made a significant difference in our lives, and whereas the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board recognizes that those teachers demonstrated unique skills, allowing them to transform their deep content knowledge into life-changing student learning, and whereas the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board highly values the caring family culture created by those teachers, and whereas the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board understands that we do not fully understand and recognize the profound influence teachers have on our future until we have lived our future, And whereas the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board realizes the importance of taking time to fully recognize the legendary teachers in our lives. Therefore, be it resolved that the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board does hereby affirm its support for September 28, 2023 as Legendary Teacher Day. We encourage our entire community to take time on this day and contact the legendary teacher in your life and express your gratitude for the difference they made in your life.
President Busby, I would just like to make sure we clarify for the record, you asked for a motion but did not indicate what that motion would be. If you'd like to clarify that the motion is to accept this.
Accept this. I'm sorry. I got caught up in reading this. So let's go back. Is there a motion to accept this legendary teacher resolution as I had read it?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Are there any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We've got our legendary teacher resolution. All right. 7.4, agreement between the State of Arizona Department of Homeland Security and the Cave Creek Unified School District, presented by Mrs. Rodriguez.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, administration moves that the governing board approve the agreement between the State of Arizona Department of Homeland Security and Cave Creek Unified School District as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. All right. So where are we? 7.5. All right. 7.5, approval and adoption of the Cave Creek Unified School District Governing Board norms and comments. Commitments. It's little, sorry.
Do you have a recommendation?
Is there a motion to accept our commitments?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. For the record, I would like to read what we had a board retreat, and from that retreat, we came up with some norms and some commitments. And commitments have various names across organization: norms, standards, operating procedures, expectations. Whichever term is used, commitments are established with the end goal of working together through trust and shared understanding on how to operate as an individual within a whole organization. On August 22nd, 2023, the superintendent and the governing board members participated in small and whole group activities aimed at establishing 3 to 5 collective norms for the CCUSD governing board. The norms created from that meeting and listed below articulate the governing board's operating values and behaviors, create understanding of how to productively conduct governing board business, and establish the foundational expectations of each individual member for the benefit of the whole governing board and the CCUSD community. The Cave Creek Unified Governing Board norms and commitments. 1, we will keep students at the forefront of decision making. 2, we will represent the board and the district by leading by positive example, actively listening, positively acknowledging comments, positively promoting the board on and off the dais. 3, we will raise awareness of the district's importance by engaging with the community to increase local buy-in. We will respect the sensitive nature of information we are privy to and seek clarification and guidance when necessary. We will acknowledge receipt of communications and inform staff of any significant conversations regarding the district. As a board member, we will contribute our knowledge, passion, and perspective to the collective decision-making of the board. And number 7, as board members, we acknowledge the board's role as a policy-making entity that trusts the role of the district leaders. So that's what we agreed to. Any questions?
No, I think we did a darn good job.
I do too. Yes, we did.
Madam President, members of the board, if I could chime in, I would echo that 100%. The effort that you put forth in doing that and really giving into the process was absolutely phenomenal for me to watch and be a part of. And I have shared this with other superintendents that I've come in contact with, and they are they're amazed that we did this work together. So thank you for doing that, and just wanted to make sure out loud that the community heard the thanks that you deserve for doing this.
And I would like to thank everybody sitting here for your authenticity and willingness to participate, because without participation and being authentic, we can't do anything. So thank you. So with that said, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. 7.5 passes. All right, where are we? 8.1, upcoming calendar events, presented by Mr. Dolezal.
President Busby, members of the board, just got a few things. Cave Creek Unified Education Foundation's Golf the District is this coming Monday, September 18th at Tatum Ranch Golf Club. Tee-off time is at 7:30 for those who are participating. The CCUSD Business Partners Breakfast is at the Holland Community Center, September 20th at 7:30 a.m. We have September break. The schools and district office will be closed September 25th. And community fundraiser coming up, CCUSD PTO fundraiser, Oktoberfest, is sponsored by Harold's Corral, an incredible business partner and school supporter for us, and that is October 30th, 2023.
Thank you. All right, item 9, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 8:29.